Hey, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending where you are watching and participating from. My name is Phil Lichtenberger, and this is the Scanner Radio. We'll call it a crash course at here over at Ham Radio University 2022. So I want to thank you for taking the time to be here this morning. Just as a reminder, if you have any questions that you have during the presentation, we will be watching the chat box. So make sure you go ahead and use that chat window to ask a question, and hopefully we will have some time at the end to answer some questions. My goal is to get through some of the material, the beginning material pretty quickly, and assume that you know a little bit about some of this material because of it being Ham Radio University. The other thing we ask is that if you find any value in today's presentation, don't forget that you can leave a small donation to Ham Radio University to help support this and to keep Ham Radio University going for years to come. So with that, I don't know, there we go. Okay, I can see we have attendees in here, so I know people are on now. And again, let me just say thank you and good morning. So my name is Phil Lichtenberger. My amateur radio call sign is W2LIE, and I've been licensed as an amateur radio operator since about the year 1992, and I've been into scanning almost my entire life. Bit about me is I host a podcast called Scanner School. I've been doing that for the last almost I think maybe 4 years now. The time is just a blur, but I've been around scanning. I know my definite start date when it comes to scanning because I remember being at my grandparents' house and watching their electric Bearcat scanner in their kitchen dance around with the lights. I remember being in their living room and listening to the police department, before encryption took over many years ago. But I remember listening to the police department and the fire department. And my dad used to work at a marine shop here on Long Island called Eric's, and it was down in the Nautical Mile in Freeport. And a lot of people would come to see him to find out what crystals they needed for their scanner radios. And of course, a scanner radio was always in the house when I was growing up, my dad being a licensed amateur radio operator as well. And it's just part of, my background, and I just grew up with it. So it's really ingrained in what I do. So I've got a lot of history with it. And, part of what I love doing with the hobby is teaching other people about scanning. So that's why I started Scanner School. And I've also been giving this presentation at Ham Radio University, with the exception of last year, for a countless number of years. I don't even remember officially when my first year was with Ham Radio University doing this. But basically today we're gonna go over some basic scanner radio terms just to try and bring as many people up to speed as possible. But I will go through the assumption that you know a little bit about this stuff, being that this is a ham radio type of program, right? Ham Radio University. So we'll kind of breeze over that stuff. Conventional scanning we'll touch on really quickly. We're going to spend a lot of time though over on trunk systems because I know that kind of is a barrier for a lot of people, so to speak. But again, if you have any questions along the way, if it's something you want me to actually, if it's something you want me to spend some time on during the presentation slides, go ahead and leave a chat comment now about that, so I know ahead of time that that's where I should stop and slow down and do that. For anybody who's listening outside of New York too, I am a New Yorker, so I do talk rather quickly. So if there is anything again that I'm doing too fast, just type slow down in the chat and I'll be sure to slow down. And Gary, I don't see anything in the chat right now, so I don't know if anybody's just not typing or if I need you to pass that through to me.
Right, I'll pass the questions through you. They're going to place them in the question chat room.
Question chat. Okay, I only have chat up, so let me bring up question chat. Okay, I don't have.
That is for you and me to talk to each other.
Gotcha. Okay, so questions are blank. All right, so Gary, just let me know if anybody needs me to slow down. So I guess everybody feel free to use the questions tab if you have questions about what we're going through today. And everybody, I assume, can see my screen too, right? You guys can see the slides. I'm looking at the presenter screen, so I don't see me, Gary, on screen. I just see what I'm sharing as far as.
You're all good, Phil.
All good, excellent. Alrighty. And then also, let's see if I can get back to this window here. We will look at this. I think we broke the matrix here. There we go. Scanning hardware. And then also we'll touch base on where to get more help, because again, this is only a 50-minute session, so I'm sure there'll be more questions that you guys will follow up. We'll get you to the next step in your journey on the scanner radio world. And also we'll have some time hopefully at the end for some questions and answers. All right, so part one, the basics. So the basics of scanning is really what is scanning. It's the ability basically to cycle through many frequencies per second, okay? And that's really what the difference is between scanning and using, your ham radio, because that's a slower scan rate usually. But also being able to monitor a single frequency or several frequencies, in a scan bank or a list or something like that. It allows you to monitor several agencies on a single radio, and most importantly though, scanning is fun. So to tie on to what we just talked about, using your ham radio as opposed to a scanner, why do we want to use a scanner radio instead of a two-way radio or a ham radio? Well, scanners typically have a much faster scan rate, and what a faster scan rate translates to is the ability to come back to a conversation much quicker. If your scanner is slow, like if you're using a Baofeng radio, which has a really terribly slow scan rate, you could miss an entire reply or a whole conversation. If you're scanning 128 channels on a Baofeng radio, you could miss like 10 seconds of that conversation. So it's really important if you're going to scan and use the right tool for the job. And there's just plenty of affordable scanners that are out there that will do better than a Baofeng, but there's nothing wrong with Baofengs. I have plenty of them over here as well. They have better memory management as well. You can have new scanners today can have dynamic memory, which means you can have 100 memory channels, you can have 1,000 memory channels in a single scan list. It all depends on how you set them up. Whereas a lot of two-way radios, you have to daisy chain banks, you hardwired into and hard coded into banks rather. It's like 10 frequencies in a scan list or something like that. Better alpha tagging, larger frequency ranges. Again, many scanners will go from say 25 megahertz up to a gig. Two-way radios typically are set up for the bands that they are able to transmit on, and maybe a little bit on the outside range of that. Also, a single radio can allow you to monitor more complex frequencies or complex systems, such as analog with P25, NXDN, DMR, all based into a single radio. And also they perform more complex functions that are available, such as RF scopes, decoding, close call, etc. So what can we expect to be able to listen to on our scanner radio? And again, present company excluded here in Nassau County, New York. Police can be received on a scanner radio. Fire departments, EMS runs, hospitals, offices of emergency management, transit, including railroads, buses, and subways. Aviation, marine traffic. You can monitor school buses, tow trucks, snow plows for those of us that are up here that just got some snow over the weekend. So basically, if it's a non-encrypted system that's on a type of modulation that a scanner can receive, we should be able to monitor it on our scanner radios. So that's there's a lot of fun and a lot of things that we can do here. So let's talk about conventional scanning really quickly, and we'll go through some common transmitter types, and we're going to breeze through these really quickly because I assume as a amateur radio operator, if you are an amateur radio operator, because again we are through Ham Radio University, that you understand the basics here. So for those who don't, let's just break down what these are. So a simplex transmission is point to point. Radios transmit and receive on the same frequency, and these types of transmissions are important for fireground communications, tactical channels. So if you're on a fire scene and you need to talk to everybody who's on scene really quickly and not have anything between you and the person you're trying to talk to, a simplex transmission is the best way to do that. Again, very common on fireground operations. Duplex is when we have user A transmits on a frequency and user B actually receives on that, but user B transmits on a secondary frequency, and that's where user A receives. Duplex is used here on Long Island and New York State with our state police. So you'll have a dispatch channel, and then you'll have the mobiles channel, and you'll see that in radio reference. And what ends up happening here is exactly that. The Troop L will transmit on one frequency, and all the mobiles will will transmit back to dispatch on a secondary frequency. It's important when you set up a scan bank for duplex that you actually don't put a hold time in here, because you want to be able to go over to the duplex channel right away to hear the response. And if you have a scanner that actually allows you to have, if you have a delay time, turn off the delay time. But if you have a hold time in your scan bank and you have a bank that's set up for just these duplex channels, put a hold time on there. This way you loop through in a cycle. back and forth through these frequency pairs, and that will help you catch more of these channels. And of course, we should all know about repeaters. Basically, a repeater is a centralized transmitter that's up in a high point, such as in a tall building, on a mountaintop, on a tower, and everybody transmits into the receiver side of the repeater. The repeater then transmits onto the receive frequency on all the radios. And the point of a repeater is you're able to use handheld radios, mobile radios, and transmit through a large geographical area. Many times when these are on top of a mountaintop, it allows you to, go through the mountain basically and transmit and be received on the other side of the mountain. So repeaters are in use, they're commonplace, and they're pretty much on any system you listen to, from fire to police to any type of major system is through a repeater or repeater system. So don't see any questions coming in so far, so we're going to keep moving through here. Analog transmissions, again, we're going to keep analog transmissions very quickly here because, again, we should all be very familiar with AM modulation. AM modulation, basically, and not to go through the science of it, I'm just going to tell you where you can find AM modulation on your scanner or radio. And again, this is why we don't typically recommend using Baofungs as scanners, because you don't get the ability to use AM. And when you can't listen to AM, there's two key things here that we try to monitor on our AM radios or AM reception, and that is aviation. Aviation is 100% AM, with the exception of maybe some ground-to-ground transmissions on airport operations. But tower to ground, the airplanes themselves, through route, it's all AM and amplitude modulation. The second service that is AM that maybe you would want to listen to and maybe you don't would be CB radio. Other than that, we use FM modulation, and FM modulation is pretty much everything else we listen to here. Commercial radio, two-way radio, public safety radio, ham radio, right? Well, ham radio also could be AM, but again, in the scanner radio world here, what we can receive is basically the FM part of the amateur radio spectrum. But FM radio can then be broken down again into, right, narrow FM and FM, and then we've got now ultra narrow, or which is now the new narrow FM. So we're looking at 6.25 kilohertz spacing as opposed to 12.5, which again in the old days was I think 25.0. So we're doing some compression in the FM spectrum here. And then again, PL and DPL codes, right? These are all commonplace in the scanner radio world. They should be all commonplace in the ham radio world. But again, as a quick review for anybody who's coming in here who doesn't have an amateur radio background, PL and DPL codes, right? This is basically a Motorola trademark term for Motorola private line and digital private line. Again, generic terms for this would be CTCSS, DCCSS, DCS, again, would be another thing we hear here. But basically, it's a analog form or a digital form of filtering. And when would we even use PL and DPL codes? Think of these as filters, not so much for as anything else. If you program in your scanner without DPL or PL codes, there's no problem here. They're not a requirement to program anything into your scanner. So if anybody is out there transmitting and you do not have a PL or DPL code in your scanner, you're going to hear everybody. But when somebody is transmitting, for example, with a PL code of 67.0 hertz, and somebody else is transmitting on 110.9 hertz, and you only want to listen to the transmission on 67.0, well, then you put a PL code in your scanner of 67.0 for that frequency, and it will mute out anybody else who is not transmitting with a 67.0 hertz PL code. That is why we use PL and DPL in our scanners, is a filter to filter out any noise or any other transmissions that are coming in. Okay, so let's slow up here just a little bit. People see digital transmissions and right away they kind of get a little hesitant here. And let me just explain here really quickly. Don't think of digital in any other form except when you're doing your scanner as analog. Okay, I know it doesn't make much sense to think of digital as analog, but if you're stuck and digital scares you, don't think of it as being anything different than what you're doing now, because it isn't really that much different. The scanner is taking care of all of the back end and hard work for you. Okay, as far as you, the user, is concerned, and as far as actually programming in a digital frequency, again, we're talking conventional right now, it's exactly the same as an analog memory channel in your scanner. Just drop the frequency in, okay? Just drop it in. The scanner will tell, if it's a P25 scanner, will tell that it is digital and know what to do with it after it samples it for a certain set amount of time, okay? So when we program in a P25 frequency, for example, in our scanner, we will just program in the frequency, okay? We don't need to worry about the control channel, or I'm sorry, the trunk. Let me try again. We don't need to worry about the talk group. I'm getting ahead of myself here. We don't have to worry about the talk group. We don't have to worry about the NAC code, because we use NAC codes now in P25. And if we're listening to a DMR channel, we have color codes and time slots in talk groups. And if we all have NXDN, again, we have radio access codes. We don't need to worry about that. The scanner will, again, like a PL code, will just take the digital transmission and pipe it through. When it comes to then fine-tuning your programming, and if you want to clean things up, yes, then you can go in and put the NAC code in, and then you can go in and put the PL code or the talk group code. When we're listening to DMR, then we can go ahead and put in the color code and the time slot and the talk group, okay? But just to get the frequency programmed into your scanner and be able to monitor it, all you got to do is just drop in the frequency. The scanner should be able to tell what it is. Now, again, for UDIN users out there, make sure you've got a radio that handles DMR and also handles NXDN, and that you've paid for the upgrade for those. All right, another thing that we need to talk about before we go any further with digital communications is the difference between FDMA and TDMA. Now, I'm not going to get all sciencey with you guys, okay? I don't want anything to go over your head or anybody to get that glaze over their eyes. I know that's one of those things that can do, especially when we're distracted at home watching a webinar. We're going to keep this very simple for you. Think of FDMA as me talking to you right now. I am owning this voice path. Nobody else can talk while I am talking. Okay, so I'm keying up the radio. I am using that full 12.5 kilohertz footprint for that frequency to talk to you. In order to get a response from you, I've got to dekey. And when you talk back to me, you are using that full frequency. Now, when we have FDMA, what ends up happening is you can have a channel that it's split in half, but it's a 25 kilohertz frequency. So you're dividing it in 12 and a half and 12 and a half. As far as think of it as analog, that's no different than having two or adjacent channel frequencies that are side by side. Of course, if you have them too close, you will get some bleed over. But when it comes to digital, these are spaced over time. They are side by side communications, literally side by side. Now, when we have TDMA, that is time division multiple access. And again, FDMA, if I didn't say it, was frequency division multiple access. But TDMA uses the full frequency bandwidth. In our case, in the screen here is still 12.5 kilohertz, but we are alternating who is using it over time. So I speak, you speak, I speak, you speak, I speak, you speak. We're not answering each other, but it's two people talking at the same time. And we're talking microseconds difference here in timing. So we can't hear it in our own ears. To us, it sounds seamless, but it's basically the effect of taking picket fencing and ramping it up, right? So again, it's user A speaks, and then user B has the ability to use the frequency. And user A comes back, and user B comes back, user A comes back, user B comes back. So there's timing advances in here, and everybody's got to be in sync with each other. It's not that difficult to do because there's a lot of overhead messaging that helps to get everything in sync. But the magic really is what time slot are we on? And when it comes to P25, we see this in phase 2 transmissions. When it comes to DMR, we see this everywhere. DMR is strictly TDMA, and that's why if you program in your ham radio for DMR, you see the ability to put in 2 time slots, and these are the 2 time slots that we are talking about. Literally, they are slots in time. Okay. I don't see any questions still coming through, so I'm going to assume that we are all good to go here, and we're going to move on really quickly to P25 transmissions and what
Phil,
these are.
just so you know, Phil, the questions are appearing to me. When you want questions near the end, just ask for them and I'll give them to you.
Oh yeah, you could feed them in, Gary, because I'll try and answer questions as they go along here. So
look at your chat window, and I'm going to push them to you there.
Sounds good. All right, Gary, we'll save that first one there till the end, and then we'll keep going through. I just want to make sure there's no questions on the presentation as I'm going through. But yeah, this one here we'll bank that one to the end. All right, so P25, APCO 25, right? Project 25. What does this stand for? What does this really mean to us? Well, APCO 25 is basically a set of standards, right? And that's the key when it comes to P25. It's a standard set that's set up through the Association of Public Safety Communications Officials International. That's where we get the acronym APCO 25, right? And it basically, it's a set of standards. It's supposed to be used primarily for public safety. This is why we see all of the trunk systems that are being deployed that are primarily used in county systems, public safety systems. They're all APCO P25 trunk systems. Now, there's a difference between P25 phase 1, P25 phase 2. I don't have a slide that describes that, but to break it down for you really quickly, P25 phase 1 uses FDMA talk groups. That's when you go on radio reference and you see the mode is set to D for digital, okay? When you go into P25 phase 2, this is when you start to see TDMA talk groups, okay? That's when you see a T for TDMA in the radio reference database when you look for the modes. That is the difference between a phase 1, phase 2 system. Right now, all systems that are deployed and I think operational are P25 phase 2 capable. That doesn't necessarily mean that every talk group on the system is P25 phase 2. Yes, you can take your P25 phase 1 only scanner and listen to P25 phase 1 talk groups on that system. You just won't be able to listen to the type 2 or the TDMA talk groups, if any, on that system. There are some systems that are being built right now, most are in the South, that are for utility, and they are now enabling TDMA control channels. So that's a whole nother ball game, and there's no hardware manufacturer out there that supports a P25 TDMA control channel, but we'll get there. All right, the next one out is DMR, which is another term that we should kind of, as amateur operators, kind of understand a little bit here. So DMR was established in 2005. It stands for Digital Mobile Radio. And again, according to the DMR Association, which makes up 40 members, including JVC, Kenwood, ICOM, Motorola, Hytera, just name a couple of them here, we have the ability to double the capacity of existing licenses. And again, we see that from the TDMA slide we showed you earlier. It basically has efficient use of infrastructure and equipment because now, again, you're doubling the capacity here. Longer battery life. Sorry, guys, I forgot to turn off my page that's going off in the corner here, so we'll get through that in a second here. Ease of use of creating apps, digital flexibility through TDMA channels, and they also claim to superior audio performance. So the thing that we want to recognize here too when it comes to DMR and P25, they both use the AMBE+2 vocoder developed by DVSI, and this is also why scanner radios that do digital cost a little bit more, because we are purchasing basically the license, the DVSI license in our radios. So again, DMR uses color codes as its filtering, right? That color codes is the digital equivalent of a PL/DPL code. We have talk groups and we have time slots. We also have different phases of DMR. We've got type 1, type 2. Type 1 and type 2 are basically conventional DMR, right? Type 1 is simplex, type 2 would be through a repeater. That's basically the simplest way to break down what the types are. Tier, they're tiers. Tier 3 would be more of a trunking setup on DMR, and we'll talk about that in just a second here. And of course, we have NXDN, and NXDN is basically the next generation of digital narrowband. That's what it stands for. NXDN, again, just like DMR, has its own forum or alliance, whatever you want to call it, and same type of usual suspects are in there. You've got Kenwood and ICOM and JVC are all members of there as well. NXDN is primarily used for commercial use, just like DMR kind of blurs the line a little bit. You'll see DMR on public safety. You'll see DMR, on some other systems, but NXDN primarily is a replacement for LTR trunking. And again, you've got Kenwood's solution, it's called NextEdge. ICOM solution is called IDAS. It primarily works the same way. You have a RAN code, then you have a talk group. But again, don't get confused when it comes to digital stuff here. So, all right, Gary, I don't see anything else that you forwarded me through chat. So we'll assume that we're up to date on questions for these topics here. So, All right, so let's slow down even more. So this is where we get a lot of people confused with trunking. I've talked about trunking for a long time, and I think that I have a really good way of working out how it actually works. Um, and okay, Gary, that's a good one too. We'll answer Prez's question at the end as well. Um, so trunking. If you guys can see me on screen, I'm going to use my hands a lot here. So I think it helps really to show how trunking works here. So trunking is really a effective way of using pooled resources. So think of it this way: if my local fire department owns a dispatch frequency, and I say owns it, I mean they're licensed for that dispatch frequency. They are licensed to use that channel in a set geographical area. They basically own that real estate or licensed for that real estate. It's RF spectrum real estate, right? If I am not using that, if that transmitter is not transmitting, it's wasted resource. It's in reserve mode basically, right? Nobody else is licensed to use that frequency in that geographical area. If you have 10 users with 10 frequencies that are not using their frequencies, then you've got 10 frequencies that are not in use that nobody else can use. Multiply that, right? Fire departments, they all want their dispatch channel, they all want their fireground channel, and maybe they want an admin channel. So now you've got 10 agencies with 3 frequencies each that they're all that aren't using right now for most majority of the time. So now you got 30 frequencies, right? And for a majority of the day, those frequencies remain dormant, idle, and are not in use. Well, this is where trunk systems come into play, because trunk systems basically take a set of pooled resources, maybe 5 frequencies, maybe 10, maybe 20, right? And they allow multiple different groups, organizations, and users to share these resources. This means that you have a very good use of the RF spectrum because the amount of time a frequency remains idle is very low, okay? And due to the nature of the beast, frequencies are only in use primarily when there's a voice user on them, with the exception of maybe a data channel and a control channel. So what is a control channel? A control channel can be thought of as a conductor in front of an orchestra, okay? This is when I'm gonna start using my hands. Think of groups as part of the orchestra, okay? So in other real world, we have a police group, we have a fire group, we have a medcom group, we have an OEM group, right? We have all these different groups. Let's think of this as violins, cellos, a horn section. Maybe you've got trumpets, maybe you've got tubas and baritone horns and trombones and whatever else. And you've got a woodwind section, right? And you've got flutes and saxophones and clarinets and whatever else, right? Belongs in the wood section. And they're all waiting to talk. And the conductor is sitting there and he's going to tell everybody when to go and where to go. So it's time to start the song, and uh, the string section comes in, and it's the violins. So the conductor is going to look at the violins and say, "It's your turn to sing, right? It's your turn right now to make music. I want all of you guys to now start, but you're going to go over, and let's tie us into the trunk system here. You're all going to go over to frequency number 1." And the violins all come in, and they're occupying frequency 1. And when they're done with their little bit of the song, frequency 1 goes back in the pool, right? So the same thing happens, right? Because in an orchestra, we have not just violins going on, but you've got the entire string section. So let's bring in the cellos, and the cellos, they're going to come in at the same time. And the conductor says, well, you guys can go to frequency 2. So now we've got 2 voice pads on a trunk system to operate at the same time. They cannot hear each other. They're independent, right? The orchestra, the conductor, the control channel knows where these 2 are. You've got trumpets keying in. Well, let's put them on frequency 3, and then you've got I don't know, tubas on frequency 4, right? When the violins stop, they vacate frequency 1. And then maybe you've got the flutes, time for their solo. Well, they can now use frequency 1 because the violins aren't using it anymore for their solo, right? And the conductor's moving everybody in and out, and they're telling everybody when it's their turn to play and everything else. And they're moving them around through the different frequencies in a trunk system. Think of it as being controlled chaos in a way, right? As users need a frequency, the control channel says, you go here. And then when they're done transmitting, they come back to the control channel and they wait instructions to go next. So let's break this down practically here. A police dispatcher needs to dispatch a bunch of units, or needs to dispatch one unit, right? The police department has a talk group. When the dispatcher keys up the microphone at the controller, a signal goes out to the control channel and says, I need a voice channel because I need to get on the air. Without ever dekeying the microphone, and as quickly as this can happen, the control channel says, frequency 7 is open, go there. The entire group goes to frequency 7. This means everybody who has a radio that's monitoring that talk group has heard the instructions from the control channel to go to frequency 7. Everybody in that group goes to 7. They hear the dispatcher. As soon as the dispatcher keys up, they all go back to control channel and they wait for directions to happen again. Well, dispatcher comes on the air and says, Unit 101, we have a cat stuck in a tree. We need you to respond. They dekey. Everybody comes back to the control channel. Unit 101 now needs to key up and respond. He keys up. The control channel says, okay, everybody from this group, we're going to go over to frequency 9 because frequency 7 is now occupied. Everybody go to 9. And the whole group, everybody who's listening to that control channel, or that voice channel, that talk group, has heard the control channel go over to frequency 7. Now, your radio might say you're listening to talk group 101, might be listening to police talk group dispatch, whatever it is. In reality, your radio is muted until the control channel, which is actually listening to, gives it direction on where to go. So you're not really listening to that talk group until that talk group has activity on it to listen to. So remember, in the meantime, this is happening over and over and over again. You've got maybe county buses, and you've got the sheriff's department, and you've got multiple police precincts, you've got fire dispatch, you've got medical runs, right? And the control channel is just sitting there with his baton saying, you go here, you go there, you go here, you go here, you go there, you go here. And this all happens. And as soon as the user dekeys, that frequency becomes available for somebody else to use. If a system is developed and set up properly, you've got plenty of overhead to have a majority of the people on at the same time. You do have the ability to have priority. So certain users do have priority over other users on the system. There is queuing and stuff like that involved too. So if somebody needs to get on the system, 9 times out of 10, they can, unless the system goes into meltdown, in which of course then it goes into fail-safe mode, which is a whole nother topic. But for right now, that is a high-level view on how trunking works, okay? So that's what's happening behind the scenes. When you program in your scanner for trunking, the easiest thing to do is to have a radio reference account, a premium radio reference account, and have software that can interface with it and self-program your scanner. Not to say you can't do it, but it's always nice to be able to bring into software the programming so you can kind of look at it and see how it's done. But really, to program your scanner, you need to program in at least the control channel and any alternate control channels. And then you've got to program in either a wildcard so you can search, or maybe you just put the radio into ID search mode, or you program in the actual talk groups you want to hear. But at a bare minimum, the control channel that is active right now, and tell it to go into ID search mode. The beauty of P25 trunking is the fact that all the information that the scanner needs and the radios need comes over the data channel. The channel spacing, the alternate control channels, the neighboring control channels, everything is all sent as part of the standard. So let's look at some analog trunk systems because they are still active in our area. The first one we're going to look at here too is Motorola Type 2. So we can find Motorola Type 2 for the meantime out in Suffolk County, New York. This will be a dinosaur. I don't know when or where, but this is the time when we're starting to see this system go down. We're sunsetting this Motorola Type 2 system. So the question that came in here too is the scanner simultaneously listening to the control channel as well as the voice channel has been directed to? Not really. So the scanner will go out to the voice channel, and then it comes back right when the voice channel. And in Motorola Type 2, we've got like an end tone that goes out In digital format, we actually have the bit that says end of go back. In P25 world, there is still some overhead control channel happening on the voice channel, so you would never really leave the control channel. You go to the voice channel, but you still get that control channel information over the voice channel when that happens. And let's see if there's anything else we have here. So the other question too, we'll save to the end, and I got to be very careful about how I answer that one. So we'll go there. All right, let's move through here because I want to make sure we have plenty of time here to go through the slides here. EDAX, we've lost EDAX here in Nassau County. This was another analog system, which stands for Enhanced Digital Access Communication System, LTR. We're going to start moving a little bit quick through some of these. LTR stands for Logical Trunk Radio, and this has been replaced by NXDN, and we're just going to skip over this because we don't really need to get into the details that we used to. Type 4 scanners are the scanners you want to look at for digital trunking. So anything that's type 4 or above, so type 4 and type 5, that's usually the Uniden trade name on those. They will not listen to MACOM Open Sky. They will not listen to Tetra. They normally allow you to listen to Motorola P25 systems. And unless you have a Whistler TRX1 or a TRX2, and if you're a part of the Uniden camp, you need to pay for an upgrade to listen to Moto Turbo and NXDN. As a side note, the Whistler product uses this funky algorithm to try and monitor DMR and NXDN. It's not actually a licensed thing. Motorola P25 is primarily what we see going out now in public safety. And again, phase 1 is FDMA and phase 2 is TDMA. Okay. One thing we'll look at here too is DMR. And again, I'm moving a little bit quick through these because I want to make sure we get through all the slides here and have enough time for questions and answers. Again, DMR in trunking world is only 2 slots TDMA. We need to program it. It's very important here at DMR. We need to know the logical channeling number of our frequencies. So with P25, where I said before, everything is sent overhead in the data channel, what the frequency steps are and everything else. With DMR, that doesn't happen. In fact, we need to actually tell the scanner ahead of time, channel 1 is this frequency, channel 2 is that frequency, channel 3 is this frequency. So when the control channel says go to channel 4, go to channel 5, go to channel 6, the scanner already knows what frequency that is because that is not broadcast over the air. So we need to make sure for DMR that we put that in ahead of time. Yes, so that was where I was going to go next. So good question. This one is Motorola Turbo, also known as DMR. Yes, interchangeable. You can look at it that way. So we have several flavors when it comes to Motorola trunking on, or any trunking on DMR. We have capacity plus trunking. This can be single sites, multiple sites linked together. There's a rest channel instead of a control channel, which is a big takeaway here. So if you're listening to this, you may hear a burst and a no burst, right? A burst and then nothing. Burst, then nothing. That little heartbeat is the rest channel, and that's really where users go to monitor the control channel, okay? With Connect Plus, it's something we're more familiar with here because there is a control channel. Connect Plus is has been discontinued by Motorola, basically, and replaced by the Motorola Turbo Capacity Max system. Capacity Max is a fully compliant tier 3 standard of trunking protocols, basically. But those are the 3 main systems we see when we program up our trunk systems on DMR. So we'll go back to that one at the end too as well. All right, so let's look at the other one here. So we also have an NXDN. We have 2 flavors of trunking on NXDN. As you know, the scanner's gonna do this, figuring out by itself. All you have to do is program in as an NXDN system if you're gonna do that. Again, you got to put the LCNs, the logical channels, in ahead of time. But there's Type C and Type D trunking. Type C basically means there's an active control channel, and that would be anything that says next edge or IDAS. And then we also have Type D trunking, which has no dedicated control channel. So that's something similar to what we see in LTR. All right. Let's see what else we got here. Rebanding was something that happened a couple of years ago, and drove a lot of people nuts. I want to just go through rebanning because we do see this a lot on Radio Reference on what rebanning is. I'm going to summarize this really quickly before we get into simulcast, because we're going to spend a little bit of time in simulcast because that is definitely something that's happening here on Long Island, and we definitely have a lot of questions coming in about simulcast too. So rebanning, what happened with rebanning was that that we had an issue where in the spectrum we had I think it was Nextel, which was basically sold as a personal radio system before it was converted into a cell system. But you had Nextel, then you had public safety, and then you had cell phones. Okay, so you kind of had public safety in the middle, and they would get interfered on. So what ended up happening, long story short, with what happened with rebanding is public safety moved down 15 megahertz, and then Nextel moved up 15 megahertz so that they could be part of the full spectrum for cell phones, and public safety be part of the public safety, and it was continuous at that point, right? So when it comes to anything that uses logical channeling and numbering, LCN, such as DMR, NXDN, EDAX, or LTR, all you have to do in your scanner is just put the new frequencies in. That's it. End of story. The issue came about when it was a Type 2 Motorola system that was hard-coded with the channel spacing and where the frequencies belonged. So if you had a rebanded system and the system said go to channel 40, your scanner would go to the old location of channel 40. We had to reflash the scanners and put a brand new mapping in the scanner that told the scanner where to go for these channel ranges, so that the scanner basically would know that instead of going this way for channel 40, it would go that way for channel 40. Okay, that's really in a nutshell what rebanding did. All right, I want to make sure we got room at the end for questions. So simulcasting in a nutshell is basically, remember the old days of analog TV where we had ghosting when we'd watch a football game or we'd watch the newscast and you would see the news anchor kind of sitting off behind himself in the corner, right? It was ghosted image of him. That's simulcasting. And really what happens with simulcasting here is instead of getting the receive from one site and being happy with it, in a digital world, this is not good when we have two sites, because zeros and ones need to show up in a specific timing sequence and a specific order. And what happens is, if you look at the screen here, we have the same data packet being sent by two sites. But if you watch, there's the second, there's the third, right? Or over time, right? That's just say 3 seconds out, 4 seconds out. Look what got there first. And then it's out of sequence, right? We got the sequence, we got the transmission out of sequence. And when this secondary one comes in as a ghost, it causes the scanner to say, I just got that packet, it's out of order, my CRC checksum has just failed. How do I put this back together again? I don't know what this is I'm receiving now because I got the same data that just came into me out of sequence. This is why many scanners don't work in a simulcast environment. Again, we have a signal that's coming from the first tower. It beats out the signal arriving from the second tower, and now we have an issue with simulcast. So when it comes out of sync, it can cause problems with simulcast distortion. Primarily, this doesn't happen on a control channel, but this really does mess up voice channels. And that's why we need something like a SDS 100 or an SDS 200 or an SDR to receive simulcast, because it uses the I and the Q on the spectrum of the frequency rather than the actual. So really quickly, where can you go for help, for more information? Obviously, Radio Reference is a great resource. We've got Forums Wiki, a database, and over 1 million registered users. There's plenty of Facebook groups out there to help you with the scanner radio hobby. There's now a bi-weekly show. They just changed it, but the scanner guys, these are guys from Scanner Master, and they have a YouTube show that they do now. I forget if it's the first and the third or the second or the fourth. They actually just made the change, but instead of it doing weekly, it's now bi-weekly. And then I have a podcast I release every Tuesday, so you can catch that out. We have over 210 podcast episodes available. We release them every Tuesday, and they're available on your favorite podcast player and over on YouTube. And we also do a live Q&A on YouTube every Tuesday, on the first Tuesday rather of the month. And of course, we submit questions and answer them as well. So now we're going to break down the questions and answers. I know I'm rushing it at the end because I want to get you guys out of here in the next 5 minutes. So Gary, I'm going to run from the top down here. And the first question that came in is, how long before all public safety is encrypted? We don't know. There's no hard law that says you must encrypt public safety. It's on a case-by-case basis. Basically, those in power to make that decision are the ones that are making that. Many places say we will not encrypt, and that's great. And some places say we'll encrypt the tactical channels and leave the public dispatch channels in the clear. And if we have to go to a sensitive conversation, we'll go there encrypted. So I would think that I would hope we won't see full encryption, but we never know. Next question is, please describe your scanner systems and use. That's actually, I've answered that one only because of time. We would never finish that question, but I would recommend going through, if we have time at the end, I'll answer that one. But I do have a podcast episode on how I've set all that stuff up. Unit and BCT 15X and 396T, please explain the quick keys for systems and groups. Also, what is the future for Suffolk County? Will they be obsolete? Yes and no. The BCT 15X will be obsolete because Suffolk County is moving over to a P25 system. It's up and running right now. We're just really waiting for the old system to disappear. And then your BCT 15X will no longer receive Suffolk County PD. The 396T, that one will not work well in simulcast. If you can eliminate the simulcast issues on that radio, such as set it up so that it only receives one tower. If you got to attenuate, the receiver on it, maybe get a Yagi and point it at a particular tower. Those are the two best ways to get rid of simulcast issues on a scanner that doesn't support simulcast. So if you can do that, then your 396T would not be obsolete. But yeah, that's what the stories with that one. As far as using system keys and groups, I need a little bit longer than 4 minutes to explain that one, Prez. But I'll try and set you up with something for that one. Next one, the scanner does not work well with simulcast. Would the unification pager work well for a simulcast system? Okay, disclaimer, I am a unification dealer, okay? I got to get that out of the way before I give you my answer. I do have people buying these pagers for simulcast and carrying one around and using it in Suffolk County. They work. Again, I'm not doing this to sell a pager. I'm just giving you an honest answer here. They work very well for simulcast. People were buying the unification pagers for simulcast before the SDS 100 and 200 came out. If you like to tinker, though, try using a software-defined radio. Those are fun to do as well when it comes to simulcast. This one here is a scanner simultaneously listening to a control channel as well as a voice channel. I think we answered that one ahead of time. But for most systems, no, it is not simultaneously listening. When you're on voice, and you come back to the control channel. The exception there being the P25 network, where there is some control channel information, not the full thing, not the full stack, but there is still some control channel information going out with the voice channel, because again, it's all data. So they're just layering in that extra data onto the voice channel, right? Remember, digital is digital. It's all zeros and ones. There's no analog on a P25 system on DMR or on NXDN, okay? Is a very old scanner like a Pro 2051 already obsolete? Yes and no. It's obsolete if you want to listen to a trunk system, but it's not obsolete if you want to listen to fire dispatch here on Long Island, if you want to listen to marine, if you want to listen to aviation, if you want to listen to railroads, right? Those systems are all still analog. They're all still conventional, and you can use even your old crystal control or your crystal radios, right? Dust them out, take them out, throw your 4610, 4646 crystal in there before those frequencies become obsolete, because both counties have made progress in moving away from low band, but they're going up to UHF. But yeah, a radio like a Pro 2051, nah, it still works. You can still listen to, fire and at least here on Long Island, right? Fire and aviation, amateur radio, CB, railroads, state police, right? So it's not obsolete on there as well. Gary, I got about 50 seconds left, so I don't know if there's anything else in here, any other feedback. I know I rushed it at the end a little bit, but I wanted to make sure we hit some key points here, and it looks like we got the questions that were in chat answered. So,
okay, very good, Phil. Thank you very much for presenting at HRU this year.
All right, Gary. And then really quick too, if anybody saw any value or had any value on today's session, I just want to remind you that you can leave a donation to Ham Radio University. It helps out Ham Radio University directly. Doesn't go to the presenters, but it helps Ham Radio University and keeps content like this coming for years to come. So if you like what Ham Radio University does, you can go and donate on their page. And also, if you want to learn more about scanner radios, again, I have a weekly podcast, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions you email me. My email is phil@scannerschool.com, and you can find Scanner School on YouTube and also on your favorite podcast player.